Our top focus on WION at this hour, a Pentagon report submitted to the US Congress has flagged China's claim over India's Arunachal Pradesh as part of its stated core interests. Now it underscores Beijing's broader national strategy aimed at achieving the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation by 2049. The report notes that Chinese leadership's core interests include Taiwan, sovereignty claims and maritime disputes in the South China Sea, and Senkaku Islands, and the northeastern Indian state of Arunachal Pradesh. It cites Chinese officials having described the unification of China and contested territories as a natural requirement for national rejuvenation and not open for negotiations or compromise. Now, the Chinese Communist Party, the report says, remains highly sensitive to any perceived threat to its rule, whether external or domestic. In fact, to reinforce party control, CCP enables unfriendly political voices in Hong Kong, Tibet, as well as political leadership in Taiwan as separatist elements which are influenced by so-called external forces, viewing them as unacceptable threats to its legitimacy and power. The report, however, says that China is probably seeking to capitalize on decreased tensions along the line of actual control to stabilize bilateral relations and prevent the deepening of US-India ties. It noted that in October 2024, Indian leadership announced an agreement with China to disengage from remaining standoff ties along the LAC. The disengagement, it highlighted, happened 2 days before a meeting between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Xi Jinping on the sidelines of the BRICS summit. It said the meeting marked the beginning of a monthly high-level engagements between the two countries. And the two sides in the meeting discussed broader management and next steps in the bilateral relationship. Well, these included direct flights, visa facilitations, and exchanges of academics and journalists. However, it notes that India probably remains skeptical of China's actions and motives. It says that continued mutual distrust and other irritants almost certainly limit the bilateral relationship. The report also details China's deepening military ties with Pakistan, a key ally, and Beijing has supplied advanced weaponry, including frigates, with 4 delivered to Pakistan in the last decade, and combat aircraft. China offers 3 main combat aircraft for export: the 5th generation FC-31, the 4th generation J-10C multi-role fighter, and the China-Pakistan jointly produced JF-17 light combat aircraft. And to unpack this further, we're joined by Dr. Shrikant Kondapalli, Professor in Chinese Studies at Jawaharlal University. And we also have with us Dr. Brahma Shalini, Professor of Strategic Studies at the Center of Policy Research. Thank you so much both for joining us on the broadcast. Dr. Panevi, let me start with you first. Does the inclusion of Arunachal Pradesh alongside Taiwan and the South China Sea signal a harder Chinese position? And more importantly, do you think India has anything to worry about?
Thank you for having me on the show. Let me also greet Professor Chelani on this. Since 2005, Chinese official documents started mentioning Arunachal Pradesh as southern Tibet, Changnan, and they have built up a lot of military infrastructure in this sector as well as in other sectors, of course. But the pressure was mounting since then. In 2006, Dai Pinko, the state councillor, who is above the foreign minister in rank, stated in the US-China strategic and economic dialogue process about the core interests for the first time. And they mentioned about Tibet, Taiwan. And then in 2009, they expanded that to include South China Sea, coinciding with the USS Impeccable incident. And then later, the Senkaku Islands with Japan as also part of that core interest. So you're right that the Chinese definition of Tibet today includes Arunachal Pradesh, and as a part of the rejuvenation that they intend to complete by 2049, the second 100th anniversary celebration, they want to claim Arunachal Pradesh as part of that southern Tibet concept. So the core interest expands now, and we do not know, of course, this is a very flexible concept. Some Chinese mentioned Vladivostok belongs to China. Some Chinese mentioned also Kazakhstan, portions of Kazakhstan belong to China. There is one more Chinese who said Hawaii belongs to China. So this is a flexible concept. we have to be wary about the irredentist claims and the nationalism that is generated in China on these territorial aspects. So it is a concern for India because there is relentless strategic competition that China is exhibiting towards India, despite what you mentioned as disengagement process in 2024 in Kazan meeting and subsequently. But we are still tied down to the border because the de-escalation and de-induction has not happened. Despite the efforts in the last few months, the de-escalation has not completed, which means that there is still a major challenge on the border, including in the
Right, Dr.
Arunachal Pradesh.
Kondapalli, we hear you. Now, having said that, Dr. Chaleni, would you agree with that assessment? The report notes that the Chinese Communist Party remains highly sensitive to perceived threats, which are both internal and external. Now, given that context, do you see this as ideological rigidity, which is translating into greater assertiveness towards India?
First, I don't think we should take the Pentagon report literally. In fact, the report is contradictory. On one hand, it says that China is seeking to lower tensions with India in order to stabilize relations with India. At the same time, it says that China now regards Arunachal Pradesh as a core interest. Let's be clear on one thing. Arunachal Pradesh is a heavily defended territory. It's heavily militarized, heavily defended. There is no way China can ever capture Arunachal Pradesh. As the MEA said very recently, and I quote what the MEA said, it said that Arunachal Pradesh is an integral and inalienable part of India, and this is a self-evident fact. No amount of denial by the Chinese side is going to change this indisputable reality. That is a fact. And for China, its claim on Arunachal Pradesh is largely a bargaining chip. I've never seen any Chinese statement saying that, yes, they say Tibet is a core interest, but I've never seen anything specifically from Chinese government saying that Arunachal Pradesh is a core interest, because they know the reality on the ground. There is no way that China can ever capture this state of India. But also it's important to recognize one other fact, that China remains an expansionist power. And the Pentagon report rightly points out that its claims to Senkaku Islands, to South China Sea, to Taiwan are all core interests. But what's the largest territory China covets? It's the Indian state of Arunachal Pradesh. That state, Arunachal Pradesh, is almost 3 times larger than Taiwan. So what China seeks, or what China claims, is basically an expression of its expansionist mindset and expansionist policy. But the reality on the ground will never change.
Right, Dr. Chaleni, and the same report also suggests that Beijing may be using the current relative calm along the line of actual control in order to stabilize ties with India, and at the same time preventing a deeper strategic convergence between New Delhi and Washington. Now, Dr. Chaleni, I want to stay with you on this. Given this assessment, should India treat China's outreach with caution, especially if the underlying objective is to limit India's strategic alignment with the United States here?
Of course, India has to be cautious, and India is treading a very cautious line toward China. And as Shrikant rightly pointed out, that even though the Pentagon report talks about disengagement at the places where Chinese troops had intruded into Indian territory, there has been no de-induction of forces and no de-escalation. So the border tensions continue, and more importantly, China has not rolled back its encroachments in eastern Ladakh. Either buffer zones have been created largely on Indian territory, or the Chinese forces remain inside what was traditionally Indian patrolled territories of eastern Ladakh. So that's the reality. And that reality can only make New Delhi cautious in its approach toward Beijing. But I think there is a larger issue that why does Beijing provoke India by making statements on, let's say, on Arunachal Pradesh repeatedly? Because India has a very reactive and defensive approach. Every time China provokes India, India dutifully repeats the stock phrase that Arunachal Pradesh is an integral and inalienable part of India. But the fact is that just the way Chinese provocations have become predictable in terms of regularity, India's response to each provocation is ritual words of protest. And in other words, India's response is just as predictable as periodic Chinese provocations. And
Absolutely.
so the cycle continues. And so the cycle continues.
We hear you. Now, Dr. Kondapalli, I'd like you to weigh in on this. Is China genuinely seeking stability with India, or is the de-escalation at the LAC a tactical pause which is aimed at managing multiple fronts here? What do you think?
Well, because they have not completed the full normalization in the bilateral relations by addressing the Eastern Ladakh Aksai Chin kind of conflict. It indicates that this is just a tactical response for the past 1.5 years. It is welcome that we have disengaged the troops, but overall normalization has not happened. Because when you look at the last 1 year dynamics, there is balancing by China. For example, soon after Dr. Jaishankar visited China in June this year, they have announced the not just the dam construction on Mutwo at the Mutwo place on Yarlung Zampo, but also the Aksai Chin region has been divided into 2 counties. It follows from that they will create administrative, paramilitary and military structures to these 2 counties announced in Aksai Chin. So that is a balancing act. The second, of course, is the dam construction in a place which is earthquake prone. It's only earlier this year that the earthquake of 7.8 on the Richter scale happened in Shigatse region, which is not far away from the Mutwo region, indicating that the lower riparian states have actually major concerns in the stability of the region. The third factor is the Western Theater Command has been given several new equipment, including the what they call intelligentized weapon systems. You may have seen last week they deployed scores of robots on the border, and also the intelligentized docks that have been put up in these places. So in other words, China is trying to upgrade its military skills. And hence, India needs to be concerned about the military deployments in the Western Theater Command opposite to Arunachal Pradesh. Of course, as Brahmachalani mentioned, we are in a formidable position because of the defenses and the
very valid points there, Dr.
Kondapalli
and Dr. Chelani. Thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast and sharing your valuable insights with us.